Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the After School podcast. I am your gaming professor, Professor Phoenix, and welcome to our very first edition of this podcast / live stream, where we are going to discuss the latest news and events in the gaming industry and anything else we'd like to discuss. For instance, today's very first topic, and one that is very near and dear to my heart as a aspiring game developer, is the new Unity Runtime Fee Policy, which quite literally set the gaming world on fire, which was honestly very disappointing news, considering where we were before we started and where we are now. But everything happened so quickly that I figured we should take a moment and go over everything that happened, how it happened, when it happened, how long this entire process went down, how the response went, and where we stand now. And I'd like to also answer any questions you guys might have, discuss anything you'd like to discuss about this topic and any related things you want to it, because this is a very important subject and one that I very much wanted to talk about. So, what is the Unity runtime fee? Well, let me break it down as simply as I can. Unity, as many of you know, is a game engine that is used to make games, along with other big engines such as Unreal Engine, Godot, and RPG Maker and Game Maker, though those are lower on the scale. And for a long time, Unity has been the flagship of the game engine community. They're the most popular, they're the most used, and they've been around for a long time. Unfortunately, it seems that Unity decided that they needed to shift their priorities recently. They hired sorry. They hired perhaps the worst person they could have for their new CEO. And let me see if I can pronounce his name correctly. John Riccitiello. John Ricky. John is, well, he's a punk. He is a guy who doesn't... I don't think he actually cares about games. But you know what he does care about? He cares about money. And here's what that means. John used to be an employee of EA. He used to be a very big officer in EA. He was a big deal. And in a meeting that was privately recorded and later released, he was discussing the idea of monetization to players and why it's so easy to take advantage of said players. He was talking about what has now become infamously known about the idea that if you're 5 hours into an FPS game and you need to reload a clip because you're out of ammo, in a normal game, you would just be able to do that. But he suggests that if you were to introduce a $5 fee to reload your clip, or whatever the fee was, they would be much more willing to do so because they're 5 hours deep into the game. And he said that's an opportunity that needs to be taken advantage of. And the very idea of that just makes my skin crawl, because to take something that is so automatic, so mundane, and so just a given about video games, one of the oldest things video games have ever done. Hey, when you're out of ammo, reload the clip. Just find some ammo lying on the ground. I mean, go to any classic retro video game and there's ammo just waiting to be picked up. But this guy is so warped in the head that he felt that this was the perfect place to put a little bit of a fee that would make that person most likely to pay money. And it just sickens me that this guy ever worked in the gaming industry and that he still works in the gaming industry. And unfortunately, he has moved from EA to Unity. He was hired as Unity's CEO since 2014. He's been there for 9 years, almost 10, which is baffling to me that he would have that sort of a job. But it really does go to show just the changing priorities of the Unity company as a whole. Because the people at the top, the board, the people who hired this guy to run their company, they must really care about the same thing too. And granted, it should always be noted that a business has a responsibility to make as much money as possible. It's a business. That's what they're in the business for, making business. And you can't run a business without making money. But somewhere along the line, that gets conflated with at all costs. Make as much money at all costs. And that's when you cross the line. And this is the sort of guy that has emerged out of that mentality. And he has infected the gaming community with this idea that you should be sprinkling monetization wherever you can. He once went on a rant calling game developers effing idiots that they would not use monetization, because he believed that the idea was so automatic and so ingrained in, of course you should do this, that anyone who would take a stand against monetization was a moron. And he got into big trouble for that post. He had to apologize, obviously a fake apology, because clearly he doesn't believe he's wrong. A person like this doesn't believe he's wrong. Anyway, I'm getting a bit ranty here. This guy works for Unity, and undoubtedly he is responsible for what has happened with the latest update to Unity's pricing structure. Now, I can't put all the blame on him. Obviously, the board is to blame for this as well, and anyone else who was part of this decision-making process. Who knows who they'll pin this on, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the results. On September 12th, Unity put out a statement saying that we are introducing a new runtime fee to our platform. Now, here's the thing. Unity might not be making money right now. It's a big company, it's leading the industry, but things change. The way that games have been sold has changed. It's mostly digital now. It's not, mom and pop stores or shipping out to Walmarts or stuff like that. And over 10 years, Unity has probably been forced to address some of its financial decisions and see what changes can we make to make things better. I don't actually know if Unity's losing money. Maybe they are. Maybe they're not. I don't really know, but I don't really care. Because, yes, Unity is allowed to make changes to their pricing structure. If they need to make more money to make a business, go for it. But you're not allowed to do what they did. And here's what they did. I'll get to the heart of the matter. They introduced a policy that any game that met a certain threshold, I believe it was $200,000 in sales or 200K units shipped on the personal Unity plan, and $1 million or a million units sold for the enterprise and pro plans. Those numbers may be a bit off, but that was the general idea. Once you met a certain threshold, every installation of that game that you ever had would now incur a 20-cent install fee. I actually have a chart that people put together for this wonderful little policy of theirs. So let me just bring that up now. So you guys can see it right here. All right. So let me zoom in on this so you can see this. This was the policy that was introduced. If you were on the personal or Unity Plus plan, you would have to pay 20 cents per install, and if you were on Pro or Enterprise, you would still have to pay, but it would be less per install based on however many installs you had over this threshold. Now, on its face, this is not a terrible idea. Okay, you want to incur a fee for every time someone uses your software. Someone made a game with your software, you want to be paid for it. Okay, and you want to track it per unit sold. Okay, well, that's an idea. But here's where the real problem is. The problem, as many of you may have already realized if you were part of this situation, is that it's based on installations, not purchases, not sales, not units shipped. Installations. And that is a humongous, enormous, biblical problem because installations cannot be tracked. They just can't. You can get numbers from, say, Steam and say, oh, how many times has this been installed from Steam? That's one option. But what about when somebody installs it on one computer and says, I want this on my laptop. I'm going to install that too. Well, surprise, apparently that counts as a second install. And according to Unity, who clarified on this point after the announcement was made and they were answering questions, yes, that does count as 2 installs. Thank you for asking. Someone says, what if I install it, uninstall it, and then reinstall it? It says, yes, that counts too. Of course it counts. And this continued on, this trend continued about all these possible scenarios that this would address. Because clearly this is a big deal because sales and money made is easily tracked. Installations is not. So to encompass the entire breadth of all the installation possibilities it's not going to happen. But they had to sit there with their FAQ and answer these questions over and over again. What about charities? Oh, those won't count. Okay, what about demos? Oh, those will count. What about piracy? Oh, this was a big one. See, Unity kept answering this question on Twitter X, with the same statement. And I love this. I actually have the statement in front of me here. They kept responding to every person that complained about the piracy issue and says, what about people who pirate the game? What about those installations? Cut and paste response. We leverage our own proprietary data model, so you can appreciate that we won't go into a lot of detail, but we believe it gives an accurate determination of the number of times the runtime is distributed for a given project. What the hell are you talking about? Like what are you actually talking about? First part, we leverage our own proprietary data model, so you can appreciate that we won't go into a lot of detail. That's fair on its face. But then the second part, we believe it gives an accurate determination of the number of times the runtime is distributed for a given project. Okay, here's the problem with that. We believe it gives an accurate number is not an answer that we want right now. We want an answer, how do you know the number of times this has been officially installed and unofficially installed? Their response, we have an answer, but we're not going to tell you what it is because it's ours and we don't want to share that with people. Tiny little break, responding to people in the chat. Hi, how are you guys doing? Welcome to the podcast. If you have any questions, please post them and I'll try to address them as we go. And yes, as Junkie puts it, based on the installs with the in-house tech statement that they made, they really are just saying, just trust us, bro. And it's such a true statement. the idea of you just need to trust us with this isn't good enough of an answer. Because this needs to be accurate. It needs to be 100% accurate, or at the very least 90% accurate. You know, that's the minimum amount of accurate I would accept when my money is on the line. But they're not going to tell us how their proprietary model works. And yet they have a solution for one of the oldest problems in gaming history: pirating games. It's something that has existed from the dawn of game development. People stealing games and distributing them without permission. The black market of video games. And in the digital age, it's so much easier than before. Because you can spoof IP addresses. You can spoof MAC addresses. You can spoof basically everything that you need to track people's information. That's why people have freaking sites where they sell these game codes for Steam and other stores, and people who steal this stuff sell it to that site because there's no way anyone's going to catch them. You know, I believe the site is called G2A. They sell these game codes to other people because people are selling game codes to them. It's their business model. They don't ask questions of where it comes from. They just take the codes and then sell them again. Oh, it's just so stupid that Unity would make the statement, we've solved this problem, for a problem that has plagued the game development industry for such a long time. And then says, oh, we're not going to tell you how we did it, though, when so much is on the line. The audacity of that, the inexplicable stupidity of that just baffles me. Because if you have a technology that could end piracy, that could track piracy across the industry, why are you saving it for just now? Why are you just now introducing it? Oh, we have this game-changing technology, this policy, this tracking information, but we're only going to use it to track how much money we're going to get from these game devs. Or they're full of it and don't actually have the information that they need. Which scenario is more likely? So either they have this game-changing policy, technology, way of doing things that could solve piracy and just don't want to share it with anyone, or they just don't know what they're talking about and are just saying essentially, trust me, bro. And they just go off of that. Yeah, like Skin said, the goofiness of that is ridiculous. And Skin is asking, is what they're doing illegal? That's a very good question, and I'm about to get into that. There is some legal duplicity afoot here, and it comes in a couple of different layers. And hello to Santa Maria. Welcome to the podcast. If you'd like to discuss anything about this, feel free to post any questions. I am happy to answer and talk about anything related to this issue. Yeah, exactly. Soup nailed it on the head. If you've solved this problem, why not share the revolutionary solution? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, we have discovered the cure for cancer, but we're not going to give it to everyone. We're just going to sell it. Or we're just going to use it to help sell cancer screening technology. You know, it's that kind of vibe. Obviously not as extreme, but, you know, whatever. Junkie says they are full of it, even if they had a way to combat if the pirates will get around in less than a week. That's also a good point. That's another problem with piracy. Once one solution has been found for these type of issues, it's easy for them to just find another loophole around it. So let's continue. Runtime fee is 20 cents per installation. and a bit less depending on how much you sell afterwards. This is problematic in a lot of ways. Obviously because, as many people point out, this creates an instant weapon that can be used to attack game developers. If you have a bad actor who wishes to damage this company, they now have the best possible method of attacking this company. We're actually going to bankrupt them. We're going to attack their wallets. We're going to attack their money. They literally invented install bombing. Because let's face it, review bombing sucks for a company, but it doesn't really affect them. It may hurt sales, it may hurt the reputation, and it may make them feel bad, but review bombing ultimately doesn't do that much damage practically to a company. But installation bombing, under this new system, it would be the worst weapon any bad actor could ever use against a game development company, and Unity is handing it to them on a platter. 20 cents is outrageous for installations. I agree, Blizzard. And that's why this was walked back. But again, we'll get to that pay structure in a little bit. There's a little more to it with how they walked everything back, quote unquote. But this isn't even the beginning of the sketchiness. As many people found out after the fact, the CEO and several other people who worked at Unity sold some of their stock in Unity, which is a publicly owned company, before this announcement was made. Like literally days before this announcement was made. And it's not a small amount either, a significant money-making amount of stock. And granted, the CEO has like 3 million shares, so the amount that he sold, which was like a couple thousand shares, isn't that much in comparison to what he actually has. But the fact that he could do that the people who knew they were going to make this announcement could make the money off of it, then make the announcement and just keep their money safe, is so scummy. This is why insider trading is illegal. Because manipulating the system to make money is inherently a scummy and manipulative practice, which is why it's been made illegal. Is this insider trading? Not technically, but it kind of is. Skin asks, so Unity sold their own stock before they made an announcement that would most likely cause the stock to plummet? Yes, that is exactly right. Not everybody, granted, just some of the higher ups at Unity, but yes, they actually did. And it doesn't even stop there. We'll jump ahead just a little bit. The CEO, John Rico Tortellini, as he's become, I believe is the nickname they're given, because no one wants to pronounce his last name. He doesn't deserve it. What he did, as in a private meeting that, again, was leaked, because everybody's leaking everybody these days, he was talking about this announcement. And he said, what was it? What was exactly that he said? It was something along the lines of, it's good that we made this announcement. They were just going to be mad no matter what. You know, it was an implication that he believed that no matter what they announced for the pricing change structure, we were going to attack them. We were going to be savage towards them, which did happen. In response to this, the internet lit on fire. The gaming industry was all over Unity for this. And dozens, if not over 100 gaming companies came out one after another and said, if you do this, we'll have no choice but to stop using your program, to take our game off the store, to stop working with you, to do this and this and that, to not work with Unity any longer. And they threatened Unity to say, we're just not going to take this. You need to stop this. And John's whole response to this was they were going to act like this regardless. Because they don't want money taken away from them. Those greedy little game developers. Which just gives you an idea of where John is sitting right now. But back to initial announcement. So, they've made this announcement. They're answering the questions. They're trying to clear up the confusion. And nothing is working because they keep copying and pasting the same answers. Game devs are getting worse and worse answers from Unity. So within 24 hours, we already have the gaming industry in open revolt against Unity. So Unity is forced to make a statement, say, we're sorry, we're going to walk back. We're going to just walk this back. We're sorry. Give us a few days, and we're going to make changes to this policy. And so the internet held its breath to wait to see what would happen. And here's the thing. The installation fee was actually a very dangerous thing, because let me show you a graph. A Reddit user by the name of Steph Moroyna, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, decided to calculate the graph of the entire pay scale that anyone would have to pay for this new pay scheme. And I'll show this window now. So I'll open this, get a little closer image. So what does this graph mean? So basically every section of this graph shows how much you would be paying Unity for how many downloads you would get from your game. However, the green sections are good because that means you're not actually paying that much of your revenue. It's less than 5%, as you can see here. This dark green, less than 5% of what you made. This light green, 5 to 10%. Yellow, a little bit more, 10 to 25%. But then this is where things really get dark. Because the way that this was calculated, the way that this was broken down, there is actually a specific section of shipments and money made from your game in which Unity could take 25 to 50%. That's this orange section. They could take 50 to 100% of your revenue in the red. And the most scary of all, this black section right here. It's very small, but it does exist. This little section right here, if you fell within this threshold, Unity would not just take all the money that you made from your game, but more. So it would actually cost you money to ship that game. Because remember, the Unity runtime fee kicks in after you reach a certain threshold and retroactively affects every single game you've sold. That was the initial plan, which means that under certain thresholds, if you hadn't made that many sales or that much money, there was a certain section where Unity could actually take the majority of your revenue because you would be paying for every single game you ever sold. Santa Mania says, my friend is angry because he's programming a game and he's mad at Unity after a while. Indeed. Programmers are very hurt about this. How could they not be? Look at this graph. You could put years of your life into Unity, ship it out, become successful. You've sold so many copies of this. You've made this much money of it. And then Unity kicks in after you've reached a certain threshold and takes all of your money. It just takes it. And then this is where we get to the scummiest part of all. There is a clause in the Unity license agreement that every developer has to sign and agree with. It's that classic agreement that everyone has to agree with when you download software. But specifically for game developers, to use Unity and sign up for their licenses, there's a clause in that agreement that says the license agreement cannot be changed up to certain degrees and certain thresholds without prior notification to the game developer who signs up for this agreement. However, it was discovered by people who were researching this that in July of 2022, that clause was secretly removed from the agreement and instead replaced with another clause that said Unity retains the right to change their license agreement at any point. And this is the most scummy part. They changed the terms of the agreement without notifying anybody and took out the very specific part that indicted them for making the change just like this. But unfortunately, a year later, more than a year later, they make this change. They've covered their tracks. They're safe from legal ramifications because that clause was removed. Is what they did illegal? Somebody asked that earlier in the chat. Is what they did illegal? Technically, yes, it is. There is a clause, and lawyers on YouTube and other more experienced people that I can explain this. There's a specific law that has been put into place to prevent agreements from being fraudulently changed after the fact without notification. Unfortunately, seeing if this applies to this situation is a whole legal mess. And no one can really make it stick to Unity unless this is investigated, which is why some game developers have actually filed a lawsuit against Unity for just this, saying you broke the terms of the agreement. You fraudulently changed the terms of said agreement and then try to charge us after the fact. And we'll see where that pans out. And that might not even fall through at all because now they've walked back everything. So, where are we in the timeline? It's been a couple of days. Unity is on the back pedal. September 13th, they say we wanted to acknowledge the confusion and frustration we heard after we announced the new runtime fee policy. So they wanted to clarify themselves even further. The first thing they wanted to say is that more than 90% of our customers will not be affected by this change. Response to that? We know! We knew that! That's not who we were worried about. We're worried about the people you are charging this. They're the ones in trouble. Duh! Did you think our biggest gripe with this is that everybody would be paying a little bit more? No, our biggest gripe was you might be destroying the companies who are being affected. Duh! Stupid! Second part is a fee on new installs only. This is a moot point, as we've already said. Once you meet the 2 install and revenue thresholds, you only pay after January 1st, 2024. It's not perpetual. You only pay once for an install, not an ongoing perpetual license royalty. So they're saying you're only paying for that one install. You're not paying 2% of the game. Again, we know that. That's not the part we're pissed about. Next part, how we define and count them. Reinstall charges. They decided we're going to backpedal on this. We're not going to charge for reinstalls. Fraudulent installs. We're not going to charge a fee for fraudulent installs. We will work directly with you on cases where fraud or botnets are suspected of malicious intent. We will work directly with you is, layman's terms, you have to come to us to fix the problem. We're not going to do it for you. You have to come to us. And I've never worked with Unity support, but I can probably say safely that would not be an adequate response. Because you're being charged actual money. And you need support from a company right now and say, we need help on this issue. You think that's what the thing that they're going to want to do right now? Let's call up Unity and see if they can help us. No, Unity's the one that's charging you. They have no incentive to help you all the way. Next part, trials, partial pay demos, and automation installs. We are not going to count these towards your install count. Early access games are not considered demos. Okay, another walk back. Web and streaming games, we're not going to count those. Okay, another walk back. Charity related installs, not going to count. It was the same as before. And then they continue on like this. But obviously, this was not enough. Obviously, because it didn't address the core issue. So people were just making all these announcements. And game devs, I've seen so many game dev announcements in the past week. Each one with their own different color and different logo, just trying to make it stand out from everybody else's, saying along the same lines as everybody else. If you do what you're going to do, we're out of here. And that's not an easy decision to make. It takes years to make games. And to build an entire game in Unity and then be told you either have to pay us for using this a lot more than before, but potentially amount that could ruin you, or port your entire game to a completely different engine, which could take even longer. That's an impossible position to be put in. But funny little caveat to that. There was a company called AppLoving. There is a company called AppLoving that Unity once tried to purchase. Didn't go through. So then Unity tried to create a competitive software to put them out of business. Or something along those lines. They essentially tried to put them out of business so that they could buy them out. AppLoving's still around. They survived. And when this announcement was made, AppLoving created an app that would help port your assets from Unity to Godot, which I think was just the most delicious irony. Unity is pulling a Twitch, says Penguin. Yes, they actually are. And here's why. I said this in the Discord, and I called this before it happened. Unity walked back their statement and said, we're going to change. We've listened to you. And we're going to change this. I called it what they were going to do. They were going to change it. They're going to walk it most of the way back, but they're going to keep a core little nugget of what they had, because they can't completely give up on what they did, because otherwise they wouldn't be a good business. Oh no, I guess we'll just have to keep in the runtime install, just a lot less than it was before. And sure enough, on September 17th, they made an announcement, we are going to change this policy. And several days later, on September 22nd, they made a full announcement and an open letter to the community. We're sorry. Here's the new rules. And I really feel for the guy who had to write this letter. What's his name? Mark Witten. Mark Witten leads Unity Create, which means he's the guy in charge of running the engine and adding stuff. You know, just overall a very important figure. He's got to be the one to apologize to the community for something that was most likely not his decision. He's got to be the one to be the face of this. Because no one wants to hear from John Tortellini right now. And anything that came from him would sound disgenuine anyways, because it would be. So they put this guy up there and say, to our community, I want to start with this. I am sorry. We should have spoken with more of you, and we should have incorporated more of your feedback before announcing our new runtime fee policy. Our goal with this policy is to ensure we can continue to support you today and tomorrow and keep deeply investing in our game engine. Skipping over, here are the adjustments. Our Unity personal plan will remain free and there will be no runtime fee for games built on personal. Took it off that entire thing. We'll be increasing the gap from 100K to 200K, and we'll remove the requirement to require the Made with Unity splash screen. Technically speaking, that's a win for every Unity personal person. They actually just got a big bonus because that's 90% of Unity developers. So they're trying to make them happy because that's the 90% of people who are not mad at us. Did you catch that little detail? They improved it for everybody who's using it for free already. But let's move on. No game with less than $1 million will be subject to the fee. For those on Unity Pro and Unity Enterprise, we are making changes based on your feedback. It will only apply beginning with the next LTS version of Unity, shipping in 2024. Your games that are currently shipped and the projects you are currently working on will not be included unless you choose to upgrade them to this new version of Unity. So what does that mean? They're saying that we're no longer going to charge you for all of the games that you've already shipped, unless you decide to update to the new version of Unity for those versions of the game, which obviously no one's going to do. Why would they? That would just cost them a bucket load of money. But this was one of the biggest issues. That black part of the graph we saw before, that was because it would affect every game you've ever sold. And whoever came up with that policy was incompetent or didn't understand what they were releasing. Because a person on Reddit managed to point out the big problem with that policy before a person who actually made the policy looked at it. Are they incompetent? Did they not care? Or were they just greedy? Or all of the above? Whatever it is, it's still stupid. So they had to walk that part back. So you're not getting charged for the games that were already shipped. Only the stuff past the 1 million threshold will be affected. So this cuts down the costs tremendously. But it still keeps the runtime fee. It stays. It stays as it is, just not affecting as many games as before. We continue. We will make sure that you can stay on the terms applicable for the version of the editor you are using so long as you keep using that version. This is a dangerous precedent because Unity has broken previous versions before to force people to future versions. They could easily do that here, and there's nothing that could stop them from doing that. For the games that are subject to the runtime fee, we are giving you a choice of either a 2.5% revenue share or the calculated amount based on the number of new people engaging with your game each month. Both of these numbers are self-reported from data you already have available. You will always be billed the lesser amount. So this is an interesting caveat that, honestly, I think they should have led with. This should have been their plan from the start. Not the runtime fee. That entire idea is stupid. But the 2.5% revenue share, that's a good idea. Because here's how Unity originally billed everyone. For every person that had a subscription to Pro or Enterprise, you were charged a certain amount of money per month to use that software. It's a subscription fee. And over time, that can add up pretty quickly. But the more successful your game is, the less that subscription model actually costs you. And here's the thing. Unreal Engine, their biggest competitor, has had the same flat revenue share fees from the beginning. 5% of everything you make after $1 million. That sounds like a small amount. And it is, relatively speaking. But let's say you make $50 million of your game. Everything after that first million, $49 million worth of sales. Let's do that calculation real quick. You're paying Unity almost $2.5 million. That's a lot of money. But you've made almost 50 million, so what does it matter? It's a revenue share. And that's why people have complained about Unreal Engine for a long time. Because the more successful your game is, the more it costs you to use the platform. While Unity's model was it's more expensive at the start of the program, but the more successful your game is, the less it costs you over time. And now with this new option, they are basically copying Unreal's system, but just making it less. And of course, I think most people would pick the 2.5% revenue share, but I guess it depends on the numbers. And then they say it's self-reported. You tell us the number of installations you got. We won't do it for you. That's better. That is better. But what if they don't believe your numbers? What power do the game devs have in that situation to prove that their numbers are legit? Unity has every right to step in and say, we don't believe your numbers. We're going to use our proprietary software that solved piracy, and we're going to give you the real number. And then the game devs might not have any choice but to pay for that new number. That's an assumption. Obviously, I'm not saying that would happen, but it could. Because Unity has all the power here. The game devs have none. The only power that they had was to straight up threaten to leave the platform, and they've used that card. And now Unity is backing down, but not all the way. And now we are in a situation where Unity has increased the price of using it. And introduced one of the most dangerous installation fees I've ever seen. Because the runtime fee is still there. It's still out there, like this big, ugly, just dangerous bomb just waiting to go off and just destroy a game developer. This caveat that says, well, you could do this or that, technically protects them. But I guarantee you that someone will go ahead with that runtime fee option, and they will be annihilated by it. It might be a rare situation, and it might be someone who gets attacked by a bad actor. Maybe it's a controversial game. Maybe it's a game made by a big company. Not a big company, a small company that people get really pissed at for some reason. A whole bunch of dominoes have to fall in place now. But it's still possible. And the fact that that possibility still exists just shows how bad of an idea. That even with all of these clauses now, it's still possible to destroy your life's work. So where are we now? Hi, by the way, hi Spitfire. Welcome to the chat. Where are we now? The reality is Unity won. Unity got exactly what they wanted, more money. And we lost. Because even with the threat of removing our games and stop working with them, they still refused to remove the runtime fee entirely. And it's such a shame because honestly, if they had just decided to go with the 2.5 revenue share, people would have accepted that. They wouldn't have been happy. I mean, obviously, every time Netflix increases their subscription service, nobody's happy about it. But they're going to pay it. Because at the end of the day, people still accept one thing. Unity's a business. And they got to make money. And they're still cheaper than Unreal in this instance. So they're still the better option. It's like, who's the best option for selling you really quick, fast food? Do you go to McDonald's or do you go to the local pop and shop store that looks like it's been abandoned for 3 years? You're going to go to the McDonald's because they're trusted, because they're consistent. Is their food crap now? Yeah, it sure is, but it's cheap and it's promised and it's guaranteed. So you're going to go to them. You go to the other place, you're taking a risk. And you're probably going to pay more because they don't have the same benefits and caveats as McDonald's. And Unity is the same way. Even if they increase their price, you're still going to stick with them because they were the trusted ones. They were the standard. They were the cheapest. They were Unity. But the damage they've done after this announcement has ruined all of that. It doesn't matter if they're the cheapest. It doesn't matter if they're the best, depending on how you quantify that. What matters is that the trust is gone. No one will ever trust Unity again after this. Because they pulled so much BS that we are now making comparisons of Unity to EA, to Activision Blizzard, to 2K Games, to the worst gaming companies in the industry. Unity has now become part of the problem because they have a CEO in charge whose only care is making money and thinks anybody that thinks otherwise is an idiot, showing just how twisted and effed up his personality and his belief system is. He would probably sacrifice all of his morals if it could give him a couple extra bucks. That's the type of person he is. Obviously, I'm making grand exaggerations, but that's just the vibe he gives of all the scummy stuff he does. And then you have the board that hired him. They're still there, guys. Unity has still got those people in control. No one was fired. No one has lost their jobs over this. And Unity got this new fee shoved it down our throats and said, you should be thankful for it. Yes, we are sorry for doing it, but you're going to take it anyway, aren't you? The thing is, I don't think Unity quite understands just how badly they've wounded themselves here. Because there are reactions that have really blown me away, and one of those was the reaction by the people who made Terraria. Relogic. Relogic did something that completely shocked me. They don't have a game in Unity. Terraria isn't made in Unity, but they have worked with it before, as they said in their statement. But Relogic decided to take a stand and say, we can't accept this type of behavior. We can't let them get away with it. But they couldn't do anything to stop Unity, so instead, they helped the people who were doing good things. They made a $100,000 donation to Godot, who currently is completely free to use. It's the third most used game engine. And they decided to pay them a huge amount of money plus a subscription for $1,000 or a donation, whatever they called it, for a long period of time to help them make this wonderful game engine. And I'm looking at polls, I'm looking at videos and reactions to all this, and people are saying, I'm done. I'm not using Unity anymore. More than half of the responses I've seen have said, this is the end. I'm not using Unity anymore. And this is the perfect opportunity for Godot and Unreal Engine, who were already viable competitors, to just swallow up all of that potential. Because Unreal may be expensive in comparison, but look at what they're doing with their game engine. Every new version is pushing what's possible for game development. They just released a system that allows you to use millions of polygons and not even worry about your engine chugging along. They have revolutionary audio technology, lighting technology. They have created the most realistic human avatars in gaming that is commonly available ever. And it's all free to use in their engine. And they're constantly pushing it further. Granted, Epic Games is making more money than anyone, so they never have to worry about making money. But their motivations for making the best possible engine is still making the best possible engine. And that's why I'm making my game in Unreal Engine. The choice was made for me. I used Unity for a long time. But after all this, just like so many other people, what choice can you make but say, we're done here? I can never trust Unity again. Because they almost pushed through a change that would have destroyed the game development industry for everyone that used their program. It would have cut their revenue down so badly for over half of the people who used it, and actually destroy some of those companies. And they did it in such a shady and underhanded and practically illegal, probably illegal way. I mean, what more can be said? What more can we say? Unity are now the worst. So here's what you should do. Here's what I recommend doing. I saw a response from a game developer that was responding to the situation, and their calm and measured response is the best I've seen so far. And I wanted to share their insights with you as well, for anyone who's watching or who will watch this. Here's the thing. Here's what you can do about the situation. Nothing. You can't change Unity. You can't help the game developers any more than you can. And you can't make the CEO and his people go away. So instead, just do what you can. Support the games that are made on other platforms. Support game developers who continue to use Unity and understand that they're now being put in a more difficult situation. Because people will still continue to use Unity. It's the easier option. I mean, if you have a game on Unity, to transition it over to another one is such a huge undertaking. It's such a risky proposition. Who's going to take that option? But don't judge anyone who stays on Unity. Understand the situation that they're in. And anyone who works at Unity, don't attack them or hate them either, except for the executives. I mean, don't attack the executives, but understand that the people who work at Unity, they couldn't have done anything about this either. This was a decision made from the top down. Nobody at the bottom had any say in this. So don't write off Unity. Keep hope that the right people will take the job and make this a better game engine. But understand that for the meantime, for the foreseeable future, Unity is probably going to see some pretty dark days. So, with that in mind, if you are going to use Unity, or if you are going to consider game development, I'd very strongly recommend that you consider other options first and foremost. So, there we are. Woo! I say we should attack the executives personally. Viva la revolution. If only life was that simple, Soup. If only. But I think that's all that we can say on the matter. If you guys want to talk more about this, we are out of time. I did go a little over. But I just wanted to air out my feelings on the whole situation. It's definitely a shame that this has happened. But things are going to be okay. And just understand the circumstances that everyone is now going to be in moving forward. And if Soup says, I mean, if it gets too bad, people will make it that simple. Yeah, that's unfortunately true. And let's not forget something that happened. This actually happened. The Unity offices had to be evacuated because a death threat was sent to that company. Turns out it was someone who worked at the company who was trying to express how upset he was over the situation. But that was the wrong decision. We are angry, but there are more positive ways to handle that anger than just to attack and threaten people. So, the best way to beat the people at the top of Unity is to not give them what they want. Just don't give them what they want. And eventually, things will get better and better people will be put in control. Because if Unity starts going downhill from here, they'll know that they made the wrong call. And the CEO will change. And hopefully the board will change. And better people, hopefully, will be put in charge. That's the hope. That's just where we are. But with any case, it's time to move on from our podcast, which I will be editing a little bit. I'll post on YouTube probably later today or tomorrow. But it's time to switch over to our favorite aquatic game. It's time for our playthrough of Subnautica. Thank you all for listening to this week's edition of the After School podcast. If you'd like to suggest a new topic for us to talk about, go to our Discord, go to the podcast suggestions, and put in something you would like to hear me talk about. Whether it's just me talking to avoid answering questions or talking to you about it, I'll take all comers. I will begin preparing for our vaunt into Subnautica. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed yourselves and learned a little something. And I will see you at Subnautica. Thank you.